All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to talk about a tool that's all about bringing some order to the chaos of machine learning projects. It's called MLflow. And hey, if you've been meaning to get around to learning this but just haven't had the time, you're in exactly the right place. So let me ask you something. Does your machine learning workflow ever feel, well, like a total mess? Disorganized, a little frantic, and just really hard to keep track of?
Yeah, if you're nodding your head right now, trust me, you are not alone. These are the classic struggles that basically everyone hits when they try to put ML into production. I mean, you've got this overwhelming number of tools to choose from, you're constantly tweaking parameters, and before you know it, you can't remember which experiment gave you that one great result. It's a huge headache.
But what if there was a better way? What if you could wrangle that entire life cycle, I'm talking from the very first experiment all the way to deployment, with just one single open source platform? And that, my friends, is exactly where MLflow comes into the picture. It was first introduced by Databricks way back in 2018, and it was built from the ground up to solve these exact problems. The whole point is to simplify the ML lifecycle.
Okay, so MLflow is basically built on 4 main pillars, or components. And the cool thing is, you can use them all together, or you can just pick and choose the ones you need. We're going to start with the first one, which is all about tracking your work. And honestly, it's a total game changer.
So just picture this for a second. Instead of having scattered notes everywhere, messy spreadsheets, and trying to remember which version of your code you used, you get this clean, organized dashboard that just logs everything for you, automatically. It's kind of like having a GitHub, but specifically for your machine learning experiments. So how does it work? Well, the core idea here is something called a run. Every single time you train a model, MLflow captures a complete snapshot of that session. And I mean everything. The exact hyperparameters you used, the evaluation metrics like accuracy, and any output files, what it calls artifacts. So that could be the trained model itself or maybe some performance graph.
Okay, so you've tracked your experiment perfectly. That's awesome. But now for the million-dollar question. How do you make sure your teammate, or let's be real, you, 6 months from now, can run it exactly the same way again?
That brings us to the second pillar, MLflow projects. This component is designed to solve that classic, infamous problem we've all heard, but it works on my machine. It does this by packaging up your whole project into a standard format, so it's perfectly reproducible. And the way it works is actually pretty simple. It all centers around a little YAML file called MLProject. Think of this file as the blueprint for your code. It spells out the exact commands to run, and it defines the environment you need, like Conda or Docker. The end result? Anyone on any machine can reproduce your run with just a single command. No more excuses.
All right, pillar number 3. Let's talk about how all of this starts building towards the final boss of machine learning, actually deploying your model.
Deployment, yeah, this is where so many great projects go to die. You end up having to write all this complex custom deployment code for every single framework you use. Well, instead of that nightmare, MLflow gives you a standard, universal format that works for pretty much any model you can build.
And the magic ingredient here is a really clever concept that MLflow calls flavors. The best way to think about it is like a universal adapter for your model. So a single model can have multiple flavors at once, like a scikit-learn flavor, a PyTorch flavor, and maybe a generic Python one. And what does that mean for you? It means you can deploy that same model to a web server, to Docker, or to a Spark cluster, all without changing any code. It makes your models unbelievably portable. Okay, last but not least, the fourth pillar. You've got all these experiments running, you're creating all these different models and versions. How on earth do you manage all of that like a pro?
That's where the MLflow model registry comes in. This is the answer. It's the bridge that connects your development work to what actually goes into production. It gives your whole team a central hub, a single source of truth to manage the entire lifecycle. So no more asking, hey, which model's in production? Or is this one actually approved for release?
What this gives you is a really structured way to handle model governance. You can track every single version, you can formally promote a model through different stages, from staging to production and eventually archived, and you can add notes and comments so everyone on the team knows the history and purpose of each model.
So, we've seen the 4 pillars. Now let's talk about how this all fits together when you go from just working on your own laptop to being part of a real collaborative team.
You can absolutely run MLflow just on your own machine, and honestly, that's a perfect way to get started. But the real power, especially for teams, gets unlocked when you set up a remote tracking server.
Look, using a remote server is a total game changer for how a team operates.
It creates that single source of truth we've been talking about, which makes true collaboration possible. You can have multiple data scientists all logging the results to the same place. Anyone can jump in and review past experiments. It just makes the whole workflow scalable and, really importantly, transparent.
Now, of course, when you step up to a remote server, you've got some professional-grade things to think about. You've got to lock down security, right, with firewalls and authentication. There's also cost and maintenance to consider. And you're now dependent on a stable network connection for everyone to get their work done.
So let's put it all together. What does this mean in practice? Well, that path to deployment suddenly goes from being this massive, complex headache to a really clear, manageable process. You use MLflow models to package everything up consistently. Then you manage all the versions and stages in the model registry. And finally, you deploy the exact version you want with a single command. Simple as that.
So here's the big takeaway. MLflow is an incredibly powerful tool, for sure. But it's really just the first step in a much bigger journey. It's your entry point into the world of MLOps, or machine learning operations. That's the practice of applying all those battle-tested DevOps principles to the machine learning lifecycle.
At the end of the day, MLflow is all about bringing structure to the beautiful chaos that is ML development. So I'll leave you with this final thought. Your workflow is complex. That's a given. But now that you know a tool like this exists to manage it, what's your next step going to be?